Greetings, I'm Hadrian Da Vinci, and today I'll show you guys how to automatically create test cases for Python. This is extremely useful for creating regression tests and for finding vulnerabilities in source code. Essentially, how this works is mutation testing, but on steroids. So this is where you take your original source code and then you make a whole bunch of different copies called mutants, and each mutant has one small change in comparison to the original. So what you do is you run that mutant through your original test cases, and if it has exactly the same result, then the mutant survives and can be used to generate a new test case. So this is the magic sauce, and this is what we're going to be doing today to create test cases. Alrighty, so to kick things off, let's install dependencies. This is Markdown. The first dependency we're going to install is called Penguin, and this is needed to actually generate the test cases. The other two dependencies are PyTest and PyTest coverage. So we'll do pip install PyTest and PyTest-coverage. So these two are needed because we want to measure the test coverage which is created by Penguin. So let's install these two. As you see here, I already have this on my system, which is expected. You guys, if you're following along, you probably don't have these installed, and you'll see different output. Okay, so now that we have this installed, I'm going to get some code that we can then create test cases for. So create code for, just call it create code. And we'll make this into Markdown as well. And what I'm doing here is I'm actually using some code that is from the Penguin examples. So I'm going to be doing curl and pulling this particular code. So right here, the file is called triangle.py, and I'm renaming this as triangle_code.py. The reason why is because within this triangle.py code, there is a function called triangle, and I wanted to differentiate between the triangle, the function, and the triangle, the file. So let's see what else. I'm going to put this this file in a folder called code. So call this code /triangle_code. And then also, before I do that, I need to actually make the folder called code. So I'll do make directory code. And then I'm going to run this. So it is complaining about something. Let me scroll up. Okay, here. Perfect. Remove those old files. So if you look here, we now have a folder named code, and when I go inside, I see that I have triangle, which is my function. And let me kind of tell you what this function does. So what happens here is it takes different sides, it takes the lengths of different sides, and if those sides are the same, then it's going to return equilateral triangle. If two of those sides are equal, then that's going to be isosceles, and then else you're going to have three different sides, and then that is scaling. So this is the simplest example that you can have. And my goal today is to run this simple example and generate test cases, and then convince you that you can use this for more complex examples. I will say that the more complex the example, the longer it takes to process and get your test cases. So let's go back outside. All right. So now that we have our code generated, we will then look at the coverage. So we're going to look at the coverage before we generate test cases. So examine coverage. And this is also marked down as well. So let me kind of break down what's happening here. So here I'm calling PyTest, which is, if you guys recalled. So let me break down what's happening here. Here I'm calling PyTest, which is what we installed up here as one of our dependencies. And I'm running the coverage because I want to see how many lines I have covered from the very get-go. Now I should have 0 lines covered because I have not created any test cases. And what this is doing is that it's looking inside of our code folder for the code that should be covered. And then it's looking in the test folder as the folder which houses the test code. And then what's happening here is that it's saying that, hey, the code that we want to actually consider for coverage, it's in the folder called code. So that's what this is saying here. And let me dive into this again. So what this is saying here is that this is looking in our code folder and it's adding this to the Python path. When I ran this before, it didn't see the code folder and it wasn't able to actually do the examination of coverage. Let's run this and look at the output. So it is complaining that it does not see our folder for test cases. So what I'm going to do here is, before examining the coverage, I'm going to get rid of this. Before examining the coverage, I'm going to create my folder for test cases. So we'll say here, create folder for test cases. And this is also marked down as well. And here we'll do make directory tests. Okay, good. So we now have our folder here for test cases. So I'm going to rerun this command. It's looking in the test case folder called tests, and it's going to see if we have enough coverage, which we shouldn't. Alrighty, so we have our output. Here it says that we have 6 statements in triangle_code.py, and we're missing coverage for all 6 statements, and therefore we have 0% coverage. And then this is just telling you the exact lines that we don't have coverage for. So let us generate test cases and then see if we do in fact have 100%. So next step is to generate test cases. And this is marked down. Instead of typing this out, I actually have the command over here, so I'm going to paste it. So we have export. Let me break down what's happening here. So this is Penguin. This is what we installed. And this is project path, which says that, hey, the code that we want to generate test cases for live in the folder called code. And then here, the output folder is called tests. This is where we want the test cases which are created to live. And then the very last command parameter, which is module name, this is saying that within the code folder, we want to look for a file called triangle_code, which is this file here. So now that we have this command, let's run it and watch it generate test cases. So it's very uneventful. It doesn't put that much output. I could run this in verbose mode again and see more output. So I'll put -v and run this. Because this is being run in a Jupyter notebook, I think the output is looking that readable. But if you were to run this with a command line, it will show you the mutants which are being created. It would also show you the mutants which survive, and then the generation of test cases. All right, so if I look at my test folder, I should have test cases, and I do. So here, this file is called test_triangle_code.py. And as you see here, we have a couple of test cases which are generated automatically by Penguin. We have 5 test cases. And let's look at the coverage. I'm curious to see if this was able to generate 100% coverage. It should, but I'm skeptical. So let's take a look. Go back over here to the Jupyter Notebook, and we will run this command again, which is to examine coverage. So we'll say that this is looking at the coverage before generation, and then after we generated the test cases, we will look at coverage after. So examining after. So examine coverage after. And we are rerunning this command. Alrighty, let's take a look. So we're looking here, and it says that we have 6 statements. We are missing 0, and we have 100% coverage, which is awesome. Yes, so it does indeed look like it worked, and we have all the coverage that we need. So looking at the big picture, we installed our dependencies for Penguin. We also created our code that we want to analyze and create test cases for. And then after that, we examined coverage before doing the test cases. We generated those test cases and then examined coverage after. Penguin is a really great tool, and I'm very excited to see what happens next.